the type of financing you're looking for, especially if you're an early stage startup, and particularly if you're in Alaska, because we don't have a huge breadth of financial options, you're looking for something that is willing to tolerate a high risk, right? You need something that will believe in your vision, as opposed to believe in a massive return on investment necessarily. And I think that there's a lot of aspects of the entrepreneurs and the startups in this state that really have difficulty finding traditional funding. And as you move down the business life cycle, that changes, right? I mean, once you launch and you have several years of sales and you can have a proven track record of management, then it's an appropriate time to look for maybe a bank loan or something. But in the early stages, it's tough. And you have to, if you really want to make things happen, you have to be willing to look at more creative financing models and more outside the box thinking. There's three main types of crowdfunding. There's equity-based, rewards-based, and crowdfunded loans. On the equity side of things, the state of Alaska actually just passed a law allowing projects inside the state to raise money from residents of Alaska in a similar way as is currently being raised through rewards-based platforms like Kickstarter and Indiegogo. The difference between rewards and equity is the equity, you take a piece of the company, almost like a stock option or something like that. The rewards-based, you get a product or service or recognition in some cases. The crowdfunded loans, Kiva.org, LendingTree, Prosper, these are ways for groups of people to band together small amounts of money to provide loans to businesses. And the interest rates fluctuate pretty wildly, but it depends on credit rating, a number of times you've used the service previously, things like that. Deciding which one to use it requires some research and diligence on your part. You really want to understand the limitations and advantages of each platform and what it means for your business, both immediately and long term. So currently, you had to be an accredited investor to invest in a company, right? And that means you have to have a certain minimum amount of income or assets as an individual or as a family. What crowdfunding does is it really democratizes the process. Anybody can invest in a company that they believe in within their state up to a certain limit. And you get in exchange a financial stake in that company. And the details of that will be worked out on a case-by-case basis depending on the project, but it will be a way for Alaskans to directly take control of what businesses are financed in the state and what businesses maybe are not. And it's a great way for us to sort of crowdsource, which is getting a lot of input from a lot of different people and seeing what rises to the top. The reason this is different than rewards-based crowdfunding, which has been around for a while, is that in rewards-based crowdfunding like Kickstarter and Indiegogo, you don't have a stake in the company. And there's actually no obligation for the project you're funding to give you anything. Like if they promise to give you a cooler or something like that, and you give them $100 with the expectation that once they get their funding goal, they'll make it happen, they don't really have to. They can turn around and say, we've changed our minds, and there's no legal recourse for that person. Plus, you don't have that actual financial stake in a company where if the company succeeds, you get to see a benefit of it, almost like a shareholder. With equity-based crowdfunding, you are entering you're using a financial mechanism that so far has only been really available to folks that are of a certain means. It allows us to make direct investments in a company and to take a personal stake in that company so that our return on investment is directly tied to their success. One of them that I really thought was impressive was a project called The Winter Project. And it was a sports documentary film centered around snow machining, something that's very quintessentially Alaskan. And it raised over $100,000. I think it was $160,000. And is to date, I believe, still the highest funded sports documentary on Kickstarter for anywhere. And they did a phenomenal job of marketing that project and did a really good good job at activating their networks and having their networks activate their own networks. So it sort of really spiraled out. They had a lot of in-person events before and during the campaign. They had follow-on communications. They released short video clips to keep their base interested. And then when they actually released the video, it was wildly successful. I mean, they sold out, I think, in almost every venue they released it in. And it was great promotion for their company. It was great promotion for our snow machine industry and sport. And it was just a really good opportunity to see how Alaskans can use this technology that was developed elsewhere to a greater advantage than anyone had before. One of the things that all of the failed campaigns kind of have in common is an inability to activate people, to get them excited. They didn't do a lot of legwork before you launch. It's not just when you launch and then when you close. There's a lot of pre-work that needs to go into it. Some of them didn't bother to put a video on there. I mean, there's certain minimum standards that people expect now that it's been around for a while. You need to have a video. It doesn't have to be a high production quality, but it has to tell a compelling story. What you're trying to do has to be really clear. You have to have a very clear goal that people can understand. They're not going to read a 10-page dissertation on what you're trying to achieve. They want to know, I want to do this. This is why it's important. This is why you should trust me to do it. And here's what I'm going to give you if you support this. So rewards. I mean, if you're on a rewards platform, you need to very clearly know and describe what people are going to get at different levels of funding. And you need to take into account what that's going to cost you. I think one of the biggest pitfalls, if I had to pick one, I'd say it's people not doing their homework when it comes to the costs associated with this. Just because you raise as much money as you needed, you still have to pay a percentage to the platform, pay a percentage to the credit card processor, pay for the rewards that you promised, ship those rewards. What happens if the shipping is international and you didn't factor that in? What happens if more people wanted a particular reward than you had anticipated and you didn't put a limit on how many of those items there were? I've seen Kickstarter campaigns crater because they were too successful. Maybe your plan was something for manufacturing and you did all your homework, but you based it around an order of 1,000 units. And people loved your idea so much that, oh my goodness, you sold 100,000 units. All the research you did on your manufacturing and logistics supply chain went out the window. They're useless, right? You may not even be able to use the manufacturer that you started with. You have to learn from the mistakes that have happened, and there's a lot of online resources to help you with that, but you really need to do your homework. Plan for not only the best case scenario, but the worst case scenario as well. You have to be able to tell a story, and you have to be able to get people excited about what you believe in and excited about what you're excited about. And that takes a certain level of sophistication when it comes to developing networks, getting messages out, knowing how often and how to communicate with people. And it can be a bit of a learned skill, right? I mean, it's not the same as just talking to people at a gathering or something. A lot of people look at crowdfunding campaigns and they get scared because what if I put my idea out there and nobody likes it and that I don't raise the money and I fail? That's not what you should be worried about. Honestly, the reason you put things out like this is so you can get that feedback. It's so you can, I have this idea, I want your support. Do you think this is a worthwhile endeavor? And sometimes they're going to say, wow, absolutely, yes, this looks fantastic. But sometimes they're going to say, no, this doesn't seem right. This isn't correct. And that doesn't mean your project is dead. It doesn't mean that your idea is useless. It just means that there's some piece of it that you still need to work on, right? We go back to this whole, what do you learn from failure? And that's what this is. You have to look at it as a learning experience. And I'll give you a real life example. One of the crowdfunding, Alaska-based crowdfunding campaigns was trying to raise a fairly significant amount of money. I think it was $50,000 or $60,000. And they launched the campaign. They thought they put together a product that everybody would love, and they were really excited about it. And they only raised about half, $30,000 by the time, there's a timeline on these, and by the time the time ran out, they had half the money they wanted. And so that means it all goes back. They don't get any of it. And so instead of just giving up and saying, well, I guess it's a bad idea, They went back to the drawing board. They got a lot of feedback from the people that did give them money. What did you like? They reached out to some of the people that left comments saying why they didn't like it. What didn't you like? They did a whole rewrite of their pitch. They changed their product in some ways. They changed their reward structure. And then they launched again, I think it was within a week. Within 48 hours, they had reached their funding goal. 48 hours. With the same product, largely the same product. And then from there, they got picked up because they got funded so fast. They got picked up by the algorithms and they got promoted and they got into tech blogs and all this other stuff. And they ended up raising the second largest amount of any Alaskan Kickstarter in the state's history. And it was all because they were willing to look at failure as an opportunity to improve as opposed to an opportunity to give up. And all of the people that they activated the first time around were the base that they built on for the second time around, which is why it was so much faster for them to raise that money, because they already had identified half of their funding. The people that liked them a week ago still liked them next week, right? And they were even more excited that they were willing to overcome that failure and iterate and become an even better product.